So, hallo und willkommen zu einer neuen Folge des Tech- und Community Podcasts. In der heutigen Folge habe ich Nicolas Blank zu Gast. Er ist MVP in den Kategorien M365 und Microsoft Azure für die jeweiligen Technologiebereiche. Microsoft 365 und Azure Compute Infrastructure. Er lebt und arbeitet in Südafrika, und um jetzt das Interview ein bisschen einfacher durchzuführen, switchen wir mal auf Englisch. Hello Nicolas, it's a pleasure having you. Please
Thank you,
introduce
Thomas.
yourself to our listeners.
Thank you. My name is Nicolas Blank, and as you said, I am both an Azure and M365 MVP. I do have a little bit of history like you, Thomas, where we both come out of the Exchange world and we followed Exchange into the cloud.
Yes, we
And
did.
there's a lot of learnings on both of those. And like you, there was a huge investment in my life that was once Exchange and now is all things cloud.
So everything is cloud nowadays.
Well, today I was writing up an article about why or what is new or not new about Exchange Server Subscription Edition, because some of our customers can't move to cloud. And there's that traditional example that we use, some of our customers, well, not our customers, but Microsoft's customers, have got nuclear submarines that run Microsoft Exchange for their messaging service. So,
You're kidding me.
no, not at all, not at all. And there are some customers that for one reason or another cannot go to cloud. So Exchange Server is still a thing. And I remember being in Germany a few years back, and I was doing some consulting for one of the broadcasting services where they were moving from GroupWise to Exchange. And I said, well, this particular thing, why don't you move it to cloud? And they say, nein, Daten bleiben zu Hause. So no cloud. And now cloud is a thing in Germany. So I could ask you, Thomas, what happened? How did cloud become from Daten bleiben zu Hause to, ja, Daten können mal in die Cloud?
Well, I definitely will try to play my Joker card as a consultant. So it depends. Primarily because there are still a vast number of, let's say, situations where clients do not move to the cloud, primarily when clients run or are part of the so-called CRITIS infrastructure, so critical infrastructure services like energy, water, and so forth. And so these are, let's say, highly regulated companies.
Yes.
Who do have external requirements. So not necessarily that they do not want to move to the cloud, but they have to fulfill external requirements to keep their data on premises. And therefore, they still have demand for using Exchange Server. But on the other side, so this is, let's say, the critical infrastructure, and the other side here in Germany, which is still lacking cloud usage, is health services,
Okay.
due to the sensitivity of the patient's data and such.
So even for a German-hosted data center?
Short answer is yes. So we that we had a similar thing, like they used to have in China. So it's a cloud data center run by a trusted party, so not by Microsoft itself.
Yes.
And we had a similar thing here with the German telecom, which was called the German cloud. So this I normally refer to that kind of thing like, oh, this was the only thing that we had in common with China. Because, so it was a closed environment, but it came with a negative impact because the overall price was slightly higher. And due to the to the nature of the closed environment of these cloud services, well, you weren't able to have 100%, so there were no feature. They were not, had the same features like in the global M365 environment. So therefore, it was pretty unattractive for various reasons, even though that the companies demanded to have a dedicated cloud service. But this was definitely prior to having at least a German region within the global Office 365 offering.
So I've got customers in China and in Hong Kong, which I used to be able to argue is not the same thing, and legally now is the same thing, but from an infrastructure point of view, is still separated. And for my Hong Kong customers, the data center in Hong Kong is still part of Azure Global and Office 365, or M365 Global, but China is China. And everything that's in China must flow through the Great Firewall, and we have to respect that and observe that. And there is there are multiple data centers in China, both for Azure as well as their version of M365, and that's still very separated. It's very much like the sovereign cloud, which the Americans have for the several clouds that they have for government as well.
Yeah,
but
that's
so
the way
much
it is.
For Exchange, right? And an Exchange in the cloud. For us, it mostly just works.
That's definitely a thing. So it mostly works. So let's get back to Exchange Server subscription edition thingy. What were your initial thoughts when reading the Exchange Server SE roadmap announcement?
Well, I think like a lot of our customers, the initial reaction is that it? In terms of features, well, there's a new license agreement. Okay. We have certificates in PowerShell. No, it's in the GUI.
ECP.
Okay.
Again.
It's back. I can disable NTLM in the next CU, so it can be Kerberos native. I have a modern version of TLS. Well, I would expect it anyway. What else? Oh, no backward support for other versions of Exchange. Well, that's potentially a problem.
Yeah, so it's more or less like the same that I thought. So, okay, so this is going to be an interesting month to come, especially for clients expecting the RTM version in what is named in the second, so in Q3, so to speak.
I think it was October.
So the RTM, yes. So the for October, by the way, the already then CU1 for Exchange Server SE is part of that announcement as well.
Yes,
so
that's right.
But at the very same time, having the 14th of October coming up, where Exchange Server 2016 and 2019 will reach their end of support. So my recommendation normally is, and I tend to repeat myself too, that clients should prepare for a migration now and not start planning and doing the things starting, let's say, in summer of 2025. That could be potentially a little bit late.
Well, yes and no, because let's face it, it's not like Exchange servers in the world are going to be switching off. It does mean that customers will be out of support, though, and that's a different issue.
Absolutely, totally agreed. But it's up to the customers if they have their own compliance. So say, okay, we need to run a supported version of a software that we use. So not necessarily only focusing on Exchange, but any kind of software they run.
Agreed.
As you're right, on October 15th, so Exchange over 2016 and 2019 will simply continue to work. So it's really at least funny days to come, especially with the overall idea that the RTM version is code identical to the upcoming cumulative update 15 for Exchange Server 2019.
So we know that effectively we are getting a name change, as well as,
Right.
and the other thing we didn't mention, Thomas, is we didn't mention that the licensing model is going to change.
Yeah. So they introduce the overall idea of having a subscription to clients who maybe at this point in time haven't or do not have any kind of a subscription licensing is Microsoft in any form.
So we know that Exchange Server, even if it's licensed in the wrong manner, will still work today. But in October, it won't.
Yeah, right. Because the overall idea of the new licensing scheme will be introduced, as far as I've read it, in the upcoming CU. So the support for the new license keys will already be in place.
So for a lot of our customers who, and to be fair, we've got customers that think in 3-year and 5-year cycles, not in yearly cycles. And those customers tend to run data centers, and they tend to think in data center terms, which is, I buy something that's something I'm going to amortize over 3 years. So very much the CapEx versus OpEx. And so subscription licensing for these customers may not work for them. But the other side of the coin is that Project Server Subscription Edition and SharePoint Server Subscription Edition already exist. And so
right.
if those same customers are running SharePoint Server Subscription Edition, not easy to say these words, Thomas. They don't roll easily off the tongue. But then if they have those already,
this other thing.
Yes, that other thing, SE. So if they have the SE version of SharePoint, then they're used to this already. And I think that that ground has already been broken for Exchange license usage, as inconvenient as it may be.
Absolutely agreed. So do you have already some kind of feedback from your clients if they tend to do or follow the recommendation of the product group? So to do an in-place upgrade from Exchange Server 2019 to SE, or do a regular Exchange deployment, setting up Exchange Server SE or a new service, and then move mailboxes as we did in the past?
Well, since the product is effectively binary compatible, there's no reason to do a side by side. So I would strongly advise my customers to do an in-place upgrade. And in-place upgrades have got a very, very bad reputation because of operating system upgrades that have gone very badly wrong. But in this case, to be fair, as long as we educate our customers that SE is effectively just another cumulative update by a different name, then we can instill that sense of safety. I would not suggest that a customer who has Exchange 2019 CU14 on server 2022 deployed does an in-place upgrade to server 2025, because that would be very messy and very bad.
Yeah, that's at least they updated the online documentation, because it was not clearly said or clearly stated that an in-place upgrade of the operating system might fail, and that it might break Exchange. But now that at least the online documentation got updated to cover that explicitly, because the operating system update is simply not application aware. Phrase it that way.
Oh, agreed. And I completely agree with you that these things have to be stated explicitly, because we remember that we still have the bad guidance that happened with public folders in 2007 that wasn't clear, that we still battle with to this day. And if things aren't said clearly and explicitly, then we live with them for decades.
Yeah, absolutely right. But at least, you named public folders. So just out of curiosity, so Do you users, do your clients use public folders extensively these days? Still?
Most of my clients are running in long-term hybrid. And that means whatever was able to come over from on premises from a public folder point of view is kind of still around, but it's very much de-emphasized.
Yeah.
And it's if I compare horses to tractors, the horse of exchange or of communication was definitely the public folder, right? And I think the tractor, or even maybe the Lamborghini, is definitely Teams because of instant messaging and sharing and all the things we used to abuse public folders for. Customers, unless they are very entrenched in their way of working, should not be using public folders anymore because shared mailboxes are a much better function. And public folders solved a particular problem from a communication point of view that frankly doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, totally agreed. So I had a customer back then where they used to utilize public folders for distributing installation packages of software, right?
Yes.
Right, especially to locations in very, very political areas. So in the Middle East.
Yes, yes, yes.
It simply took quite some time, depending on the overall amount of data that needed to be transferred via SMTP.
That's amazing. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
it worked.
Of
So
course it did, because it was robust, right? And the problem was that public folders as well as mailboxes got used for things that they were never designed to, but they just worked. I had a customer, so I was a messaging admin when I myself I was a customer. I worked in London in the early 2000s for a law firm that was also globally distributed. So we had global public folders and exchange clusters in different parts of the world. And one day, because we were storing data on SAN, this was still Exchange 2000, and storage in those days, as you know, was more expensive than gold. So one of the
yeah,
lawyers used to make a backup of their hard drive by opening up File Explorer and highlighting everything and dragging it into Outlook, into a special folder called backup, because it worked. And we found this out because on a Monday morning, we realized that this lawyer had made a backup. Friday afternoon, the last thing that he did, just drag and drop everything in. Monday morning, where's all the space gone? So we looked at mailboxes that had grown
over the
massively from
weekend.
over the weekend, as you do. And it's like, what is inside this mailbox? And so we visited this fine gentleman who said, why did you do anything? He said, I do the thing I normally do. I back up my computer. And how do you back up your computer,
Wow.
sir? Well, let me show you. And so he opened up File Explorer and he showed us how he used to just drag files into his mailbox. The other thing that I got out of the legal fraternity is that deleted items is a filing mechanism for emails that you are done with, but you may never delete.
Yeah. Yeah, because
So we used to have these mailboxes that just grew and grew
yeah.
and grew. And one day I said to my management, could we automatically empty deleted items? I nearly got fired.
Yeah, I bet it did, because even though that you're done with such emails, right? You simply do not know if you might need that information at some
That's
point
right.
in the future,
That's right. And
right?
it's a legal email.
Yeah, it's a to be honest, I do have the gut feeling that this is quite a common behavior.
Mm, mm,
So it is not unique to a small number of clients,
mm.
but a very large number.
It doesn't surprise me that you had the scenario where software was distributed with public folders because it worked. And in the days where satellite links were really expensive and we paid dollars per megabyte to transfer SMTP or anything really over those expensive links, it just worked, and somebody paid the bill.
Yes, so this is something that, especially these days, when running in Exchange server, even in a multi-Active Directory site environment, that's something that these days no one really thinks about, right? That we had costs that we had to configure to do a proper routing, for dial-up lines or lines that had to be utilized over during the night and such. These days, just it simply works.
Yes,
Uh,
dial-up
who
lines,
who
yes.
and that's why I think that the whole idea of Active Directory side that knowledge is slightly vanishing, especially since that the certification course for MS Exchange got came to an end last year. So it's simply there as Active Directory, but I think that Active Directory is something that is maybe going away. At least first clients are asking, how can we switch off the hybrid identity and hybrid exchange thingy and decommission our Active Directory. Is this something that you face with your clients?
Absolutely.
Those clients that are not using Exchange on-prem 100%, right?
So I don't have anyone who still uses Exchange on premises because they want to be on premises, right? They have Exchange hybrid, and they have hybrid because they have to, not because they want to, because of the whole management pain that we have and the dependence on Microsoft Active Directory. And it's because Microsoft is not investing to make this problem go away. So they have the engineering ability, but there's not enough money to do it because, well, it's not going to sell anything new. So customers really, really want to switch off Active Directory. And one of the big reasons for it is that it's a 24-year-old attack platform. I was talking to one of my customers today, and I said, literally, the only thing that I need to breach your Active Directory is three things: Ethernet access, a YouTube subscription, and access to GitHub. And why would we not want to switch it off? Because the knowledge of how to hack Active Directory is free. Attacker tools like Mimikatz are free, and it's a critical dependency. And as long as I've got Ethernet access, I can very quickly get to domain admins. If I have an account already, a skilled attacker will do a silver ticket or golden ticket attack in minutes. So why would I not want to switch it off? The problem switching it off, though, is that for a small company, it's relatively easy. For a large company that does management, mature management out of Active Directory. So we're not just talking about desktops and GPOs, but servers and GPOs for which Microsoft does not have a equivalent mechanism. Then it becomes problematic. And the only version, a modern version of Windows Server, so Server 2022 Plus, can domain join a cloud provider like Entra ID natively, but nothing below that. So we do have a problem for all of our customers who want to switch off something, but they're running Server 2019 and older. So it does mean that we need to keep behind enough Active Directory to manage those server resources, which are used by users in the cloud, which means, ta-da, we're back to the scenario that we have today. But we need to use something like, if I'm a pure Microsoft customer, the upcoming to be released SSE product, which will allow me to do that kind of separation between on-premises and cloud usage for users. But today, it's not released yet. It does work really well for those customers who've got it in private preview. But generally speaking, switching off Active Directory is complicated for customers who've invested heavily in Active Directory over the last 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, so Active Directory is more or less here to stay, and Active Directory environments that are, let's say, in use for 20 something or 20 plus years. I think that it's not necessarily a question, if the Active Directory is compromised, it's more or less a question, to which extent.
That's correct. I think that's a very fair comment. To which extent?
Right. So, which brings me to the zero trust framework, where I've noticed that you co-authored the Microsoft Zero Trust framework. So maybe we can talk a little bit about what is zero trust and what can such a framework do for a company.
So there's two things here. There's zero trust, which are the three principles of zero trust. And there we do responsible adult things in terms of principles. It's not a framework. It's not something you can be compliant to. In the most simplest terms, zero trust means I don't trust anyone or anything unless they can prove who they are all of the time. I look at restricting the amount of rights people have to the bare minimum, and hopefully that includes a finite amount of time. And my favorite one is I assume breach. So if I'm a responsible adult and I assume breach and I'm being responsible, then I have to look for breach and I have to be prepared for breach. So part two of this is the Microsoft adoption framework, or the Microsoft Zero Trust adoption framework, which basically looks at the business problem that we have, which is that business leaders have got no idea about security because they think it's an IT function. And what the adoption framework does is two things. Number one, it says if you are a business leader, security is as much of a business imperative as profit. Because without security, you don't have a business, and without profit, you don't have a business. And the other part that it does is it spells out for you in terms of business scenarios that business leaders can understand how to implement a zero trust framework with steps that they can follow. Quite literally, what is the responsibility of the CEO, the CFO, the chief marketing officer from a zero trust or a security point of view? And then, if you are the IT person responsible for switching things on, what do you switch on and in what order? But I just want to mention, because we are being responsible adults, we are not making the promise that you are secure. We are making the promise that if you follow the methodology, just like when you follow a weight loss methodology, there will be a result, but you have to follow the method. And the method says, because remember, one of our founding principles is that we assume breach. So as responsible adults, we prepare for breach. In the Zero Trust framework, or the Microsoft Zero Trust adoption framework, everybody prepares for breach. From the CEO downwards, what happens on the day when we get breached, and how do I prepare for it, and how do I mitigate for breach? So therefore, we now have predictable security outcomes because we expect crime, we expect breach. So therefore, we become predictable in terms of our security outcome. We know something bad is going to happen, but it'll be okay because we are ready. It's a very different point of departure than the promises that we had from previous cybersecurity frameworks that said, if you do these 3,000 things in exact order and juggle all these balls at the same time, and you buy this tool and that tool and that tool and that tool and that tool, and you're compliant to
then
these 58 things, you will be
you're
quote
fine.
unquote secure.
Yeah.
But we know we won't be. So we take the approach that what we can do is we can frustrate the attacker enough that the attacker will go away.
That's quite a nice term, to frustrate the attacker.
So John Kindervag, who is the creator of the Zero Trust framework, he has a quote which says that the only thing that can stop the attack is the will of the attacker. And so if we raise the
Yeah.
friction to the point that the attacker doesn't want to play with us anymore, they'll go play somewhere else.
Yeah. So somewhere else where it's easier to breach.
Exactly right. And there's no shortage of breach targets in the world, as we know.
Yeah. Which brings us back to legacy versions of Exchange.
Exactly right. And reasons
I
why we should not be running Exchange on premises anymore.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Because even though that we haven't seen any exact numbers, but nevertheless, the pro group showed quite a nice diagram. Where it was easy to realize, how many legacy Exchange versions still connect to Exchange Online, and
Yes.
this was slightly frightening. And
But Thomas, you and I both know that, and because we do the same thing, we will not change unless we are given a reason to change. And why would I change if it works? And our customers will only change, or those customers, to be fair, do not have a business reason to change because it works. They don't care about Microsoft support, otherwise they wouldn't be running Exchange Server 2013. And the only reason why they'll change is because the pain is large enough to want to do something about it. And that often means they get hacked once, twice, three times, and then they go, no, this is too much. I'll go to the cloud now, or I'll modernize.
Yeah, so it's where I sometimes I just have a feeling of an upcoming heart attack. When I'm being contacted. We are still running as a small business server. That's
Yes.
where the moment I think, okay, because the overall migration path are the migration options depending on the overall age of such legacy systems, that aren't might be small or even not available anymore.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
doing such migrations is a challenge of its own.
Where do you still find the software to install the servers next to it so that you can move the mailboxes and do the things?
Yeah, so haven't we all some kind of a hidden repository of, let's say, legacy ISO files of older versions? So
Yeah.
just in case that we can do something.
I used to. I used to. But now it's easier for me to say, "Oh, so sorry, this stuff doesn't exist anymore, and
Oh, it's gone.
it's gone."
Yeah, sorry for that.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so one final question that I ask my guests is, how did you find your way into the IT industry?
It was always my default choice,
Wow.
always. And I remember being in high school, and I was always interested in technology, always. And I just didn't know what to do with that interest. And I remember, and you and I are both of a generation where we still used to have libraries and books. And I used to go to the school library and try to find any book on technology, if it was engineering or robotics, and robots were this new thing. And then one day I was given what was it? It was it was a clone, but it was a 286-based machine running DOS 3.3. And since then, I can say, because I had to work with legacy systems in those days as well, the oldest version of DOS for me was DOS 2.0. And I've actually worked on original IBM PC, the one with a tape drive.
Yeah.
But all of that fast forwarded to, I was always going to do something with computers. And one of my first jobs was fixing computers in a store. And then I was exposed to this thing called networking. Novell, what? We can connect these things together.
Wait.
I kind of found my way there. In those days, Novell Netware 311 had this massive stack of books. And my boss used to say, read this book, which is how to do print servers, because tomorrow that's what you'll be doing. And so I became ridiculously good at Novell printing, even though I wasn't certified, because I read the book and I could just fix everything because I understood it. So after that, I was introduced to this semi-scandalous upstart called NT351.
Ooh.
As a potential replacement for servers. We were quite comfortable with Windows when Windows 3.1, the first serious version of Windows came out, and then it still used to do this horrible thing called NetBEUI, and then Windows 3.1.1 for workgroups had a TCP/IP plugin, so it could talk to other things, including the internet on the other side of a modem. So I followed the path of having played with nearly literally everything until one day I bumped into Exchange Server 5.5. And I was really, really good at fixing things once I understood them. And I used to do disaster recovery for a while. Things fell over and I used to be able to fix them. And then I got exposed to Exchange 2000 Beta 3. And Active Directory on Windows 2000, which was, it kind of worked, kind of. And the beta versions, right? And then Gold came out, or the RTM version. And since then, we've been doing Active Directory for a very, very long time. And I used to work for a software vendor called Quest, which in those days was the largest software company I had never heard of before they became the big animal that they were. I used to work for them when I lived in London. Learned lots of interesting things about management and working for an ISV before I became a consultant again. So I was always going to do this in one shape or another. That's a very long answer for your question. I'm sorry.
No. There's no reason to be sorry. So, it was interesting just to hear that, especially back in these days with Novell, where we had this coax-based networking thingy, and even troubleshooting, the networking infrastructure those days was just
50 ohm terminators.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
So for whoever is listening and gets reminded of the operating system versions, I do remember doing the 351 workstation and server setups, which is So that's the age we are in.
Many floppy disks.
Yeah. So before we had those compact disk folders provided by Microsoft. Yeah.
Yes.
All gone already. Nicholas, thank you for being a guest in my podcast show.
Pleasure.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you.
And thank you for having me. You've been a very gracious host, so thank you very much.
Thank you.